the mayor has assisted to another engagement. I'd like to thank again, Gary, for your support, the venue and your time, for the community time. But please, give your chance to have opening remarks for speaking and that,
Sure, I won't make it long. I'm happy that our council is here. So, this is our municipal planning council, and I'm always having bugs, sir. I'm happy that you reached out to us, because there's always comments about how we don't do nothing through information, we don't share our plans. But then I think the conversation that one of my staff had, I think it was Leo earlier, about how the participation may not have been so much in the other villages. And that's a good thing that we have to publish, right? And we have publication notices so that there's proof that we actually came out. And I'm just glad that you're out here, coming out to villages to let us know what's going on with the power plant and the power plant. So I'm glad that you're in TV, and I'm glad that the council is here to listen. I do have to step away in about 30 minutes, but thank you for this handout, and we'll definitely reach out on behalf of the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
So I'm going to continue on in terms as part of intros. Again, I'm Kim Flores. I work for the firm of TG Engineers. I used to be in the GPA for almost 35 years. I think you probably recognize the face. But with me today with TG is Marvin Aguilar. He used to be with the Department of Land Management as the chief planner. He's now with our firm to help with projects with the company. But more importantly, we have folks representing.
Oh, so we are live streaming this.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need a mic.
We are live streaming it on the TV.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Man.
No pressure.
Yeah, look, prim and proper here. Okay, sorry. Just to continue on with the introductions, Marvin Aguilar from the firm of TG, my colleague. Representatives from the Guam Ukudu Power Corporation, Leilua, Princess, and subconsultants to and contractors for the project. The EPC contractor is Busan, and representing Busan, the gentleman in the back, as well as Guam Advance, the folks at the corner here with Guam Advance, who are actually working on the pipeline currently for the initial phases of the work, which is the demolition of the buffer pipeline. We have handed out a slide presentation, and because we don't have a screen, I will just refer to the slide numbers that you can see at the bottom left-hand corner of each slide. And as I talk through the slide, I will reference those slide numbers for your convenience. Okay? Okay, you ready? How are you? So with that, I just want to start off with trying to convey to you the purposes of these meetings. Really, it's just we've conducted a very comprehensive environmental impact assessment. TG Engineers was a part of that study with the firm of Black and Veatch. We've delivered that EIA to Guam Environmental Protection Agency, and it has been accepted. And so it was a thorough analysis, everything from cultural, economic, socioeconomic impacts, of course, environmental impacts, both of plant and animal species, as well as archaeological impacts as well. So the whole comprehensive subject matter in the EIA is available actually, and if you're interested in getting a copy of that, it's fairly lengthy, but you can get access to that EIA through the process that is described in this presentation. But tonight, they want to provide additional information of the project and an avenue for which information or concerns, perhaps complaints, during the project as well, for information gathering and responses back to the community. So we went out through Sinane, Canyon Heights, Barrigada, Mungtoto Maiti, and the district today. Last night it was Asan Mahina. And tonight it's going to be Piti, and we'll end with the incumbent village where the power plant is located in Denver. Okay, so that's the whole purpose, and it's really a constant outreach, an avenue and a mechanism for gathering information from the community at large. So, these studies and our work and the work of TEPCO and Guam Ukudu Power may not be complete, and there may be things that we have missed or they have missed. And so this is an opportunity, even though the project has been approved and has started, it's still an opportunity for information to come in and be addressed with your concerns. So on slide number 2, I'll be talking about the background of the project very quickly, the description of the project, and the compatibility of the project as it relates to the main facility of Piti, which is across the Micronesian Mall, approximately a 16-mile pipeline from the Piti fuel farm that's across the street at the GPA Navy area, through the village of Piti up Route 6, to Turner Road, and then it jets off to the left into the existing Navy easement, and that varies between 40 and 60 feet in width. So they're not using any new properties, they're not displacing any new communities, they're not purchasing any private lands. It's going to be on existing pipeline easements that were defined during the Navy occupation and all the Navy uses. The reserve facility is something that came was an afterthought to the power plant because of permitting requirements and lengthy requirements for permitting. And it's now situated in the Piti Caverns area next to the fuel farm. I'll describe where that location is and talk about it. On slide 3, very quickly, this is the organization that's involved in this entire project. Guam Power Authority actually published and issued the RFP. They do not own or operate or finance this project. They're going to be paying for this by the purchase of all the power that is generated by this development by Guam Ukudu Power. Okay, so they're defined as the off-taker. Guam Waterworks is also involved in this because now there's an opportunity for this power plant, instead of using potable or drinking water from the aquifer, they're actually going to be using gray water or water that would have been discharged at the Tengisan outfall as wastewater. They're going to be using that water in the plant. They're treating this water, filtering it, and using it for cooling. And then sending the water back in equal to or better quality to the Northern Wastewater District plant for discharge. So they have to comply with those very strict requirements with US EPA discharge permits. The main point I want to make is that with this feature of the plant, it literally saves about 1 million, just north of 1 million gallons per day of drinking water that would normally have been used for cooling had it not been for the proximity of the wastewater treatment plant. That's the nice thing about this plant. So it reuses and recaptures water that would normally have been discharged into the ocean. KEPCO EWP, as you see in the center of the chart, has formed a corporation called Guam Ukudu Power. They are now a registered business corporation on island. They will be part of our island community, business community for the island. So they will be here for the next at least 2.5 decades, providing operations and maintenance of the plant. But Guam Ukudu Power, as shown here, has hired Dusan as the EPC contractor. EPC stands for Engineer, Procure, and Construct. So Dusan is in charge of designing and procuring all the materials and providing all the equipment and labor to construct and build this plant on a very, very aggressive schedule, I might add. And I mentioned Guam Advanced as part of this, the Dusan EPC team. They're actually doing the demolition of the existing pipeline, and they've started already doing that, and they've proceeded from Piti to, I think they're now in the Tofu village, cutting up the line and removing it in place and preparing for the actual construction of the pipeline. And then, just for your reference, the financing banks are also referenced in Mizuho, Korea Exim Bank, and perhaps other syndicate banks that will take advantage of the any credits or investment credits that may apply to this project. With page 4 or slide 4, I just want to just very quickly point out the property that is involved up at Dedadu across the Micronesian Mall. It was a 59-acre private land that was purchased by GPA. This land was initially owned by the military. I think it was an Air Force annex. Turned over to the Guam, Governor of Guam turned over to the ancestral lands, and then in return finally got private ownership. For which GPA then purchased the land and by the approval of the Public Utilities Commission and the CCU. So there's public policy and even public testimony that supported the purchase of the property back in, I think it was 2017, correct? Oh, I'm sorry. I forget to mention, my apologies. As part of the presence is GPA representative Jennifer Sablan and Joyce Sayama at the back as communications manager. Jennifer has been also with GPA for many years, generation manager for a short stint, and now the planning head for GPA, who was probably the lead person who created and drafted the RFP document for GPA. Sorry, Jen. Sorry, Joyce. And if I missed anybody, my apologies. The property that was purchased went through the legislature for what we call a zone change to light industrial M1. So the property now has been rezoned. It was agricultural initially when it was turned over, changed to M1, and then the legislature indicated very clearly that even though we're changing the zone, the developer and GPA still have to go through all the permit requirements necessary to develop the property. And one of which TG Engineers was involved in securing a height variance for the Ukudu property with the Guam Land Use Commission, because many structures, I think 13 structures, are well above the 30 feet height limit for an M1 industrial zone. So I think one of the stats is about 132 feet in height for this project. The pipeline I mentioned is about 16 miles. It's going to consist of 2 lines. One is going to be an 8-inch diesel line, and it's going to be buried underground. It's going to be underground instead of above ground. The second line is a 10-inch high-pressure natural gas line. It will be installed in place until GPA acquires a contractor, developer, operator of a new LNG facility, hopefully within 3, 4, maybe 5 years, depending on permitting requirements. That facility perhaps would be located in the Piti Upper Harbor area. So they would bring in gas in liquid form and then vaporize it into high pressure and then send the vaporized gas up to Dedadu for fuel. So in this case here, this is a requirement for gas to be burned as a dual fuel capability of this new power plant. Number one, it really is much cleaner than the black oil that is being burned in caverns. It's cheaper in some cases. It's much cleaner, and also there's a legal requirement because GPA has entered into a US EPA consent decree to retire the Caverns 1 and 2 plant. The Caverns 3 and 4 plants have already been retired because there was an accident that occurred. So 132 megawatts have to be retired or burn much cleaner fuel, and I think eventually it will be retired instead of being kept to burn diesel fuel. Only 2 other plants at Caverns will remain, which is Piti units 8 and 9, to currently burning black oil or residual fuel. It has to be converted to burn ultra low sulfur light diesel fuel, much cleaner than the heavy oil. I think the estimates and the testimonies from GPA indicate that after the gas is delivered, or even when the ultra low diesel fuel is delivered, there would be, I think it's greater than 1,000 times improvement in the emissions into the environment, which is a much cleaner air quality. You don't have all the plants situated in Caverns, but you will have a new plant, which is called the reserve facility, 41 megawatts, burning the ultra low sulfur diesel fuel. okay? After about 4 years, the plan is that they have to convert over to natural gas. The nice thing about natural gas, methane, basically, is that there's no sulfur content in methane. You don't have the acid rain, you don't have that rotten egg smell when that fuel is burning, because that's sulfur content. With natural gas, you have no sulfur, and it's much cleaner and much better for the environment. So there's a great net positive improvement to the air quality around the Piti area. But in order to achieve this development, this pipeline has to be constructed. And it has to be constructed within those easements that I talked about with the Navy, with the exception of Route 6. Because there were some environmental sensitive areas like wetlands and very difficult terrain from the Sasa Valley area to right around Nimitz Hill, they wisely, the contractor has decided to reroute the pipeline up Route 6 on the shoulder of the road and staying within the right of way of the road. And then it goes up Route 6 to Turner Road, and then it goes up to Turner Road and then continues to follow the existing pipeline. Okay? So it's 2 lines underground with the exception of Route 6, everything else follows the right of way, all the way to the Micronesian Mall facility. Moving on to the next slide, slide 6, this kind of gives you an overview of the 2 endpoints very quickly. You have the diesel plant, which is called the reserve plant. It's 41 megawatts. I think it's 16 units. Those 16 units are not going to be burning gas. I just want to make that clear. They'll be burning only diesel fuel, but they're not going to be operated like we have at Capris now, where it's 24/7 operation. These units are mainly reserved and used for maintenance purposes or in the event that there's emergencies. They're really standby emergency type units. They don't operate 24/7. They're only operating when they're absolutely needed. Okay? When the new power plant up north, as you can see, the Ukudu CCPP, that's 198 megawatts. That would replace the 132 that's going to be retired. The Capris 3 and 4 units at 40 megawatts each. So there's quite a good number of power generation that would be displaced, but then it would be made up by the CCPP indebted. That's 198 megawatts. The difference with this plant with Capris is it captures its exhaust heat. Instead of emitting the exhaust heat into the environment, it captures all of that heat. It's very, very high temperatures and creates steam in a boiler and further generates more power with an additional power generator, steam unit. And it makes it much more efficient than what you have here at Capris 3, 4, or 1 and 2. So it reuses wastewater. It has the capability of dual fuel, diesel and gas, and its thermal efficiency, because it captures heat and regenerates power, is in the order of magnitude of maybe 58% thermal efficiency, as opposed to maybe 39% at Capris. So that thermal efficiency, you have much more efficiency, more power energy to be delivered to the island, and more reliable power. I think GPA has testified that Capris is now approximately 47 years old. It cannot continue on this path for the next 4 decades. It has to, because again, it's burning legacy fuels. It has very poor efficiency. It's now becoming more and more unreliable, and the operating expenses, because it continues to grow over time. On slide 7, just kind of give you an idea of the proximity to key points of the northern wastewater treatment plant and approximate distance to Kumon Bay. Oh, by the way, though, even though GPA purchased 59 acres at Ukudu, 18 acres, once the plant is completed, will be the finished project boundaries. The rest of the property GPA intends to develop with other uses, perhaps solar or more energy storage, maybe even another power plant, depending on how that works out. But it's not the full 59 acres of the property will be used by the CCPP by GUP. It's only 18 acres, but during construction, that's going to be expanded to maybe 25 for construction purposes and laydown and logistics. And then once it's completed, that would be 18 acres. There's a core road that is in front of this new power plant that you take normally when you go to Two Lovers Point. That's called Beach Road or Route 34. To the right of that is an old Navy access road. That access core road would be improved to full capacity highway standards for access to the plant. And it will connect from Beach Road, Two Lovers Point Road, all the way to Route 3. So then you have 2 points of entry from Route 3 and from Route 1 via Beach Road. The other thing is that they will extend a sewer line, a new sewer line to the power plant for incidental uses for toilets and a small kitchen and fire water, etc. So the sewer line would then also be connected and attached to connected to the plant along this new paved road. And so there's another opportunity for further development in this area with private owners. Okay. On slide 10, very quickly, I know this is a lot of technical labeling, but I'll just try to explain to you. This is the layout of that plant over 18 acres. You have storage tanks for the ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel. You have water storage tanks for both firefighting as well as for the use in the boiler, which is purified water that is going to be used. The gas turbine building, cooling towers, and the stacks. If you can see the stacks there, they're colored red and white. Those are the tallest structures on site, which is about 132 feet. And so they have the permits to build the structures. The zoning is correct with an M1. It's consistent with the power plant development. And their permit, I'm not sure, maybe Jen, you can confirm it. The permit is soon to be issued. The air permits from US EPA, Guam EPA. I believe they're working through some conditions, but that permit has been under significant review by the agencies to issue. And once that air permit is issued, then you have authorization to actually construct it. They've already cleared with a clearing and grading permit, but to build the foundations requires that air permit to be approved. Some of the points for compatibility of the project on slide 11, you can read them on your own, but I just want to highlight several that are key elements, salient points of the project. Number one, that it replaces the old plants, very inefficient plants at Cappers, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 is already retired. And it forces GPA and to convert units 8 and 9 from burning heavy oil, black oil, or residual fuel oil to ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel. So the overall air quality in the PD community should be greatly enhanced with a positive impact. The public law 3546, with this plant allows greater expansion of the solar farms that have now been approved and under construction. And the reason that's the case is because these units now are integrated with energy storage facilities and the responses of the unit, the way they're designed, allows for greater response times and avoids the intermittency you see in solar energy. And so now GPA wants to promote more and more solar energy. I think their testimony showed up to 400 megawatts, including the 120 that's under construction and the initial 25 megawatts at Dundan. So they're on their way to achieve this portfolio standard by law in less than 5 years. The site leverages existing assets here, both here at Cabras as well as at Ukudu, because the Harmon substation is less than 1,200 meters away, 1,200 feet away. And here at Piti, you have a transmission line just across the street from this new power plant. So you would integrate and leverage those main transmission facilities. There will be 3 new transmission lines for this project to Harmon. And again, it's very short distance, so you really save a lot of infrastructure costs. Traffic would be minimum because the plant, once commissioned, will operate perhaps anywhere from 20, maybe up to 30 personnel on a given shift. So that's not very many people traveling in and out of this power plant and utilizing that new road. There will be perimeter fencing to secure for safety and security, as well as the standards for the design for both the pipeline and these plants have to be met by very strict standards. On the air side, on the construction engineering side, the pipeline has to follow very strict standards, because of the environmental and also the public impact or safety would be a concern that needs to be addressed very strictly under these codes and standards. We've also looked at a very comprehensive biological survey for wildlife, animal, and plant species. There were 24 snail colony habitats that were found along the pipeline. They're listed as federal species that are protected. They're not just local, but they're federal. I don't know if you remember when I was a kid, they used to make these leis out of shells. You can't do that anymore. They're very protected, and the penalties for taking these listed species are quite severe. So we also have negotiated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that certain best management practice or mitigation to protect the snail colonies have to be done, and Guam and Vance has to adhere to those, what we call BMPs, to ensure that those colonies are protected, right? There are some wetlands that were discovered along the pipeline, and those wetlands also have to be, the recommendation for the wetlands was full avoidance. So wherever they've been delineated, the contractors have to avoid that and protect the wetlands in those areas. Archaeological concerns, they have to be, excavations has to be monitored. And so whenever something is found, there's pre-approved, what we call archaeological monitoring and discovery plans that have to be enforced. There's already a process in which if they find something, whether it be significant or not, there's a process in which that data or the artifacts are recovered, documented, archived, and then finally reported when all excavations are complete. So I think I can pause there for now and then open the floor up for discussion and any concerns. Again, please understand, we try to do our best to address the issues for the environment, any cultural concerns, socioeconomical issues, sound, air, traffic movement in our environmental impact assessment. But that may not be perfect, and I think the public may know something else that we don't know that may be addressed. For instance, the mayor of Agana Heights brought to our attention that anecdotal data was given to him telling him that there were some Agent Orange discharges on the pipeline behind Agana Heights. But there was no evidence of contamination that we determined during our environmental site assessment phase 1 surveys. But it's been documented, and it should be researched whether that's true or not. Any contamination that's discovered by the contractor has to be addressed, whether it be along the pipeline or at the new diesel reserve facility or at Ukudu. I have to say that during my time at GPA, there were many oil spills along the pipeline. But over monitoring for several months with Guam EPA and USCP, they determined that there was no longer any more contamination. The sites were clean when I left. So, but again, if there's something else found, that has to be done. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor for any discussions, any concerns, anything that I didn't mention that you want clarification on, please let me know. Great.
No one else. First of all, excuse me,
Hang on.
we're not having one there.
Oh, sorry, there you go. Right, there's the mic. We're live streaming.
Sorry, I forgot my mask on. I'm sure a lot of people, Piti, probably have thank you, the concern about, any contamination that might affect Rio School or might affect the village. And I know GPA's had a lot of experience in the past with Guerrero School, and I believe in the Cheche plant, which seemed to show that there's not an adverse effect. But maybe could you focus a little bit specifically on the 41 megawatt facility and whether you think that its construction there at the site will result in any potential danger or harm to the villagers.
Okay, thank you. That's a good. So we throw you back to 1994 when they built the Macheche combustion turbine at JM Guerrero Elementary School. When they first constructed that plant, this was the emergency load shedding where we had to get all that generation in place within 120 days. And everybody worked 24/7. Well, what happened at that plant was that the stack was only perhaps maybe only 35 feet tall. It was burning diesel fuel, and it was 0.5% diesel fuel at the time. Well, lo and behold, when they commissioned the plant, the kids were smelling the sulfur, the rotten egg smell, and GPA immediately came up with a remedy to raise the stack from about 40 feet to 150 feet. And that problem was immediately mitigated, coupled with the fact that they reduced the sulfur content on the fuel from 0.5 to 0.6% down to about, I think ultra low sulfur diesel fuel was not present at the time, but it was reduced. Now, for this plant, this new reserve plant, it's currently going through some evaluation with US EPA with the data that has been shown for the air modeling results. And that's all at ground level. US EPA, Guam EPA has to be assured that at ground level, you're not getting those air quality impacts. One of which is the smell of the diesel fuel. That should be addressed in this current permit that is being evaluated. Okay. Now, I don't believe the stacks at the reserve units are going to be 150 feet. We weren't asked to conduct or perform another height variance for this particular facility. But again, number one, it's only running very few hours of the year. It's a reserve unit only. It cannot run just based on its permit request. This permit is being sought. It's going to only run less than 20, maybe not even 20% of the year in terms of 8,700 hours. It only runs as an emergency or for maintenance purposes as needed. And you're limited to that permit anyway for the number of hours of operation. Number two, it will be burning, instead of 0.5% sulfur content, it will be burning 0.0001% sulfur content. So the content is dramatically less, the sulfur content is dramatically less than the current or past diesel fuel. So you don't anticipate that sulfur smell, right? The rotten egg smell. Lastly, and it has been shown, the data from the GPA, they have to do fuel switching. And so predominantly the winds come from the northeast. And so when the northeast winds come, it blows most of the cavernous emissions offshore, not towards Piti. Right? And it's only when you have the westerly, southwesterly winds does it come onshore. And current GPA has to switch from heavy oil, high sulfur, to heavy oil, low sulfur. So you have a lot of things that may help, address and allay the concern. Number one, the units don't run every day. They run only a very few number of hours a year. With the new power plant, because it's brand new and it's much more reliable, that's probably going to be rare, a few and far between operating hours. Number two, you have prevailing winds that blow most of that emissions offshore anyway. And when it does blow offshore, perhaps GPA may not dispatch these units and dispatch other units in the north. And so, I think that's how I would address that. It's got to be, and then finally, US EPA, Guam EPA has to be shown by modeling evidence that the technology that's going to be used with the actual machines that is going to be installed will not cause air quality impacts at ground level. And that has to be modeled through the, including, my sense is they would have to model all the units in Cabras, remaining units, which is 8 and 9, and these 16 units that are remaining, that is left. So, and then finally, you're retiring Cabras 1 and 2, which is heavy oil and inefficient, and you can see sometimes the opacity of the emissions is orange, and during the daytime. And so a lot of the current emission levels will be removed, right? So the quality of air is going to be dramatically improved. I think I'm kind of reciting what GPA's testimony has presented.
I could ask one more, just to follow up.
Go ahead.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Ken.
Okay.
But could you, as a professional engineer, give an opinion that the construction of this new 41 megawatt plant will not likely result in any harm or potential danger to the students of Rios or the citizens of Piti?
Wow. No, I with all the regulation that's in place and all the very intense scrutiny that has to be that oversees this permit, excuse me, the codes and standards have been elevated to much higher and stricter standards. I think if you look at it from a permitting standpoint, from an engineering construction point of view, where the plant is actually going to be located in an industrial area to begin with, I forgot to mention when the property was turned over to GPA from the Navy, has always been designated for power generation use, even by the Navy's determination. So, and really, it's an ideal location to build a power plant, and it's offsetting very poor generation now. So the answer to, in my opinion, I'm not going to put my PE stamp on it, but in my opinion, it should be safe to the children of PD 11. You have existing stations now that are within less than 1,500 feet currently at PD Elementary School, and unless I'm wrong, during even my stint, I've not heard of any impact to the students or the elementary students here at PD Elementary. Even when you had a whole complement of units, you had 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 8 and 9, and you had a combustion turbine there's 6 units, operating sometimes all of them at the same time without my knowledge or ever knowing that there was an incident with the elementary students here at PD. Now, 4 of the units are gone, will be gone after this plan is finished. 2 will remain, but burning much cleaner fuel. And keep 10 is number 7. So I don't know. I think the bottom line is, I think with this new development, the estimates are headed towards 1 million barrels of heavy oil savings a year. And right now I think because of Russia and all the things going on, it was $120 a barrel. So you multiply 1 million times 120, that's $120 million a year in savings. And that just trickles down to all ratepayers. You're burning less fuel, you're providing more energy, and which is much more reliable source of power. And then you're enabling much more solar development because the technology with these new plants can mitigate all that fluctuation in power and cloud cover, and with solar and energy storage. Yeah. Anything else?
Regarding, getting back deeper on that question, again, I think the most important thing to realize here is that whatever output and how that output comes about they're following strict, current, up-to-date EPA regulations. So I think that's a very critical takeaway from this whole thing.
Anybody else?
So thank you for your time. So back, I guess, to the pipeline idea, or the pipeline, the necessary pipeline. So you talk about using the existing footprint, except for from Sasa through Maso up to San Carlos. Will that segment of pipeline that currently exists, will that be removed even though it's not being replaced in that area? So the rest of the island is being removed and replaced with underground lines. So for that segment that's not being replaced, will that infrastructure be removed?
I can't address that. Maybe perhaps is there, GUP, can you answer if the Sasa Valley portion to Nimitsu will be replaced? I know that most of that line was flushed.
Okay.
So there's no remaining oil in that line because it's being chopped up. There's only a small portion, I think, in Route 16 and the airport. There's still some fuel in that line that has to be pumped out and cleaned before they start cutting it up. But I would insist that whatever fuel is remaining in the pipeline is removed and the pipes are flushed out. Eddie, do you know if Guam Advance has been contracted to remove that Sasa Valley? So probably not, probably left in place. But you currently have, I forgot to mention, you currently have 2 jet fuel lines to Anderson Air Force Base.
Correct.
They're 10-inch that provide fuel to Anderson Air Force Base currently now, but it's underground. And we will utilize that same easement with a buffer zone away from the jet fuel lines to construct these 2 new lines. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, but it seems to me logically that it has to be cleaned. It cannot be left in place. And if it's left in place, then, I mean, there's some portions of the line now. I'm not sure if you ever, because I used to mountain bike throughout that whole area. Some portions of the line are actually been abandoned and replaced with other new line, but it was just left.
And then to follow with that, the replacement lines, or I'm sorry, not the replacement lines, but the new lines to go under Route 6, will that be ripping up the road? Or would that be just along the side of the road and everything that goes along with that? Will the road be properly surfaced and fixed back, or is it something that's going to?
Yeah. I think when I was initially involved in the EIA and then some of the environmental studies, I saw that the routing was off the shoulder. Now, it's not going to be completely cleared of the pavement, but DPW and their highway encroachment requirements are quite severe. If you cut up the pavement, you're essentially replacing a full lane back to its original condition with the friction course that it needs to be. So they won't be able to get a highway encroachment permit. They won't release their bond if they don't repair and replace the road to the DPW standards. Anybody else? Municipal Planning Council? Anybody? Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, like I said, in the back of your slide presentation, there's a mechanism for data gathering and input gathering with contacts and a process in which they can respond back to your input. So please, if you remember something later, you have that mechanism, you have that avenue to send in some concerns or questions or complaints or even a grievance. If you remember, even during construction, you have this process. So, folks, during construction, if there's an impact caused by the construction activity, then you have another avenue you have a mechanism to report these concerns.
I have one more question. The mayor.
Yeah.
Again, sorry, here. Basically, he's asking, what is the risk factor in piping natural gas through Route 6? Along Route 6 through Route 6.
Well, it is a volatile fuel. I have to be very clear about that. Jet fuel is a volatile fuel, and they've been pumping jet fuel to Anderson Air Force Base since the 60s. So if it's designed properly with, fail-safe solutions and leak detections and proper cathodic protection and good engineering practice and design with with features in the pipeline that is fail-safe. If you have a leak, then the leak is captured immediately with sophisticated computer systems or mechanical systems, that leak has to be isolated immediately so that you don't expose danger to the adjacent public. Those systems have to follow strict Department of Transportation, US standards, and those have to be approved by GPA. But GPA eventually that line will be turned over to GPA for its operations, right? So, yeah, it's a volatile fuel, and it has to be designed right. It has to have fail-safe solutions, and it has to be monitored on a continuous basis so that you don't have those hazards that will persist when there is a failure. A grass fire was brought up the other day, but again, these are underground lines. There may be valve pits along the pipeline, but if the easement is maintained properly and you have a fire break on the boundaries of the easement, not encroaching into private property, then you have to do all those safeguards to do proper maintenance, good practice, to ensure that there's no problem with that line and no hazards created. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's now, according to my watch, 6:47. I will call the meeting adjourned, and thank you again, everybody, for your time tonight.